woods by any means in terms of this pandemic, but at least we've reached a kind of a stable number of new infections and the number of people who are dying from this illness. If you
and
one last point
at one point we were talking about. Let me just say, at one point we were talking about models. 1 million people. Then it was 100,000 people. Then it was 60. Now we're already up to 53,000. So give me a sense of the number. I understand these are predictions, but the number of fatalities we might see from this.
So I think modelers are pretty reluctant to model way beyond a month or two out from now because of so many variables. If we change our social distancing policies and depending on how well states get prepared for the easing into the reopening, that could change outcomes quite a bit. But the leading models at the moment predict anywhere from 58,000 deaths to 110,000 deaths in the next month in the United States. I think no one's really modeling beyond that. And really it's going to depend on many things that are difficult to wrap up into a single number.
All right, let me ask you one more question, trying to foresee the future. Vice President Pence gave a timeline this week for when we're going to come out of this. Here he is.
If you look at the trends today, that I think by Memorial Day weekend, we will largely have this coronavirus epidemic behind us.
Memorial Day weekend, Doctor, is that realistic?
Well, at this point, if you go state by state, you see that about half of the country, the numbers are still rising day to day. And about another third of the country, there seems to be a leveling off. And only in a minority of the country, the numbers are actually coming down day by day. And so I don't think it's likely that we will be at that position by Memorial Day, but even more importantly, wherever we are in the epidemic, this virus is going to be with us until we have a vaccine. So as we ease up on social distancing measures and economies begin to very carefully reopen, we are at risk of recurrence or respikes in the illness, in the epidemic. So I think everyone needs to be aware that even as we're beginning to open up again, there is a clear chance of a rise in cases in states that are doing that.
Let's talk about that, because a number of states, as you know, are beginning to reopen: spas, salons, gyms, even restaurants. Is that safe for people? You know, you talk about a spa where people are giving massages, a salon where people are filing people's nails or cutting their hair. Is that safe for people to be that close at this point if they're wearing masks and gloves?
I don't think it's going to be possible for anyone to say something is safe, completely safe at this point, because the virus is very transmissible between people, and because some people don't have symptoms, at least either in the beginning of the illness or maybe even at all during their illness. But we can say some things are safer than others, and businesses that have small numbers of people are probably safer than businesses that have very large numbers of people. And the closeness of the interaction, that also is a factor. So if people are going to be closely interacting, they should be using personal protective equipment if that's available in their state. And outdoors will be safer than indoors. So there is a range of different, there are going to be a range of different risks that businesses face. And it's important for all businesses now to be trying to understand the risks and making plans for how to diminish the risks as best they can within their own business, their own operations.
Let me ask you a quick, direct question. Would you feel safe at this point getting a haircut, getting a massage, if you and the person doing it were both wearing gloves and masks?
I think at this point in most places in the country, with the rate of illness as it is, I don't think so. There may be some places where community transmission is so low and testing is so good that we have confidence that the risk is low. But I'd say I would be cautious about doing that at this point.
You talk about testing. I know one of the problems you have with the White House guidelines is that you think they failed to address the issues of testing and contact tracing. Here is President Trump on that this week.
We're doing very well in testing. We've tested far more than anybody else anywhere in the world.
So, Fauci, that we're just not there yet.
No, I don't agree with him on that. No, I think we're doing a great job in testing.
We're averaging about 150,000 tests a day. Isn't that enough?
No, it's not enough. And the reason why is because we're not testing a lot of the mild and moderate illness that isn't people who aren't sick enough to be in the hospital. And so all those people are not getting counted, and they aren't necessarily having their contacts traced or told to isolate in their own homes. So we're missing a lot of the illness in the country. Until we get that under control, we're going to continue to have lines of transmission that we can't see. And beyond that, many businesses are now really beginning to think about how the diagnostics might factor into their reopening plans. And we just don't have diagnostic testing available on large scale for businesses. We're still focused on diagnosing the sickest people, those in nursing homes, healthcare workers, which is completely appropriate. But they're a small fraction of the number of people that we're going to need to test to really find all the illness and to get the economy moving in the right direction again.
I want to squeeze two more questions in here in the time we have left, Doctor. I want to ask you about another White House guideline, and that is a steady decline in the number of new cases over the course of 2 weeks. I want to put some stats on the screen. Oklahoma is coming down from its peak, but had a 26% increase in new cases in the last week. And it went, over the course of the last week, the numbers jumped from a low of 29 new cases last Sunday to over 100 new cases just this past Thursday and Friday. Should a state with those kinds of numbers be reopening now?
Again, I would be very cautious about doing that. I think we've seen, there's an example in the papers this morning about a state in Japan that reopened quickly in March after a few weeks of lowish numbers, and 3 weeks later rebounded to the point where they have to now close their economy down again. So I think it's going to be important to really go slowly for those states who do reopen. I think it should be done very carefully with a lot of monitoring of both hospitalization rate, ICU rate, death rates. So at this point, only about 5 states in the country, to my count, have had 2 weeks of decline. So only about 2 weeks in the 5 states rather in the country have met the gating criteria laid out by the White House.
I got about a minute left for one final question. As you know, President Trump has come under fire over the last week or so. First for advocating the use of hydroxychloroquine, and then later this week for talking about the possibility, speculating about the possibility of injecting disinfectant. Here he is on that.
I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
I know you want to stay away from politics, and I think it's clear that any kind of ingestion of a disinfectant is dangerous. But two quick questions. One, where are you at this point about the use of hydroxychloroquine? And two, how do we sort through all of the conflicting advice that we get?
Well, to your first question, I think there needs to be more study of hydroxychloroquine. 2 studies that have come out so far have suggested it is possibly more harmful than helpful and possibly dangerous. So I don't think anyone should be taking hydroxychloroquine unless they are in a randomized controlled trial that's being carefully studied. And the second point is that I think the most important thing now in terms of medicines and vaccines is to follow where medical leaders and scientific leaders guide us. They're doing the studies. These studies take time. These medicines can actually hurt people, so there is a harm that could potentially happen if people take medicines that aren't studied. So it's important to follow the scientists.
Dr. Inglesby, thank you. Thanks for joining us again and giving us your expert analysis. Please come back.